All right, everyone, we're going to get started. I know many of you are still coming in from lunch, but to keep things moving and to get you guys out of here on time, we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Jim O'Mara, and this is my colleague, Kathy Good, and we're here to spend the next 50 minutes with you talking about something a little different than FASBs and taxes, something that you might be experiencing today or something projects you've done in the past, but ERP in the cloud. So I know we had a tough follow-up with the past two speakers, one being Heather and also the next one being your lunch. So hopefully we can do a good job and keep you guys entertained to the extent that those did. But that said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So, see if this thing's working. All right, so on the agenda, list of topics we're going to talk about today. So the current state of on-premise solutions to the cloud. Top 5 cloud packages out in the marketplace today for small and medium-sized businesses. Top 5 things to consider when you're selecting a product. Top 5 implementation success stories and things to keep in mind as you're implementing projects. And then top 5 things that can cause projects to go AWOL or kill the project in timelines and budgets. So I don't like this tagline because it says only CIOs are faced with the tough decisions of choosing on-premise and cloud, but I think it's many of you in this room as well. It's the controllers, CFOs, even operations that have a large decision in this process. So although it says CIOs are faced with the challenge of selecting a new ERP and whether you're doing on-prem or the cloud, it's really all of you. So how many of you today are using a cloud ERP or even a cloud application, whether it's a tax one like Vertex or like a Blackline for account reconciliations? Many of you? Yeah, the majority, right? How many of you are only using on-premise still today and are wishing they were using the cloud? A couple? How many of you don't know what the cloud is and don't know what I'm talking about? Anyone? I'm sure this topic's been beaten to death by now. So for the majority of you, these stats should not be too misleading. So by 2020, according to Forbes, the organizational norm will be hybrid ERP environments where companies and organizations are using both ERPs in the cloud as well as some on-premise systems that remain for various reasons, whether mission critical, sales, or employee data or customer data that needs to be retained. So also, Gartner projects at least half of the large enterprises, so not just the small and medium size, by 2025, so a little bit longer time period for this, but due to the nature and size and complexity of some of the larger ERPs, I think this makes a lot more sense. The enterprise SaaS market is now generating an astonishing $20 billion in quarterly revenues for software vendors, which is a year-over-year growth rate of 32%. Which I'm sure if any of you guys are decision makers in here and are purchasing these new cloud systems and implementing them, you can attest to some of the price tags that can come along with ERP implementations and other software. It's astonishing, but there are many benefits to that, which we'll talk about a little bit more on some of the benefits and cons of using the cloud versus on-prem. Then finally, just to attest to that number of how the software providers are doing in their revenues, but companies are spending over $1.3 trillion in spending in the cloud by 2022, just an insane, massive number that is being spent. I'm sure everyone here has heard the term like the digital transformation, and that's all what this is all about in the cloud, moving everything digital, everything being available mobile, being able to do things on your phone and iPads versus just having to log in, be in the VPN at all times, get your work done. So there's a reason that this spending has increased. So although this says top 5 ERP packages for small and medium-sized business, I wouldn't say it's the top 5 in my opinion or even this author's opinion. It's just 5 of the top ones that are out there. There's just too many. And it really depends on your business, your processes. You can't really say that one is significantly better than another. It really depends on your processes and the way you're running your organization. But these are just 5 that we chose to highlight as ones that we see out in the marketplace today. So this chart shows some of the key functionality and requirements that a lot of decision makers, CFOs and CIOs and others will take a look at when they're evaluating the various cloud solutions that are out there. So looking at the first three, shouldn't be a surprise. All five of these, Acumatica, Dynamics, NetSuite, Sage, and SAP Business, are all able to handle multi-currency. They all have a form of document management where you can store all your invoices and other documentation, and all have expense reporting. Where I think it starts to get interesting on this list is moving down halfway in the LIFO and FIFO row. So if you're a manufacturing or a distribution company or even some others, and you look at this, you can see the first four all have the check marks across the board, but this is where SAP 1 starts to kind of fall from the others in that respects, where they don't offer a LIFO way of costing for your inventory and only offer FIFO. So depending on your company and the way you run things, this could be a factor right up front before going any further. Another one or two that I want to point out on this chart before going into a little more detail on each of these solutions is the HR and the CRM. So if you're a company that has all disparate systems today and you're really looking for a solution in the cloud that can bring everything together, have your HR, your sales, and your financials all in one system, then these particular ones would be of great importance to you. So looking at this, you can see, at least as of the time that this study was done, 3 of the top 5 that we're saying are the top 5 don't have an HR solution today. Now I say that with an asterisk because Oracle NetSuite does have a HR module that has been newly implemented and coming out, and that is actually now available. So at the time this was written, though, it was still being newly released. Alternatively, on the CRM side, the top 4 have the CRM, but again, SAP, they fall down again here in their business edition not having the CRM. So I think this is a critical piece for when you're looking at the full set and want to have all your functionality into one system rather than having to buy multiple contracts and multiple systems and having to deal with integration pain. So a key factor when you're looking at some of these. So the next couple slides are going to highlight some pros and cons and a summary of the 5 ERP solutions that I had in the table in the previous slide. So the first one, starting with Acumatica, I'm going to actually switch to the table rather than some of the summary details. The pros I want to call out here are the solid reporting, the non-user-based pricing, and the use of mobile devices to run the application. And the reason I say these 3 are the most important out of these pros are, how many of you have implemented a project, leadership decides it's the greatest system ever, you started your project going on and the processes work great, but then there's no reporting. Can't get any reporting out, or it's, oh, that's going to be custom. Sure, it happens all the time, right? So for them to highlight this and have this one of their key ones, I think helps them to stand out. The next one I think is the most interesting, and it's out of the 5, it's the only one that highlights this feature, and it's the non-user-based pricing. So for those of you that are decision makers and have purchased cloud solutions in the past, you know how that can go and how expensive it can be, and you pay on this monthly basis for each user. You're also probably familiar with the watermark term, which means if your company decides at the time of purchase to buy 25 licenses, but after go live you determine you're only using 15, you're still paying for that 25, and there's no going back down until your contract is up for renegotiation. So by Acumatica doing their pricing structure not based on the number of users but rather a flat fee, I think it's a competitive advantage that they have versus some of the other solutions that are out there. And then finally, on the use of the mobile device, again with the digital age and people being access to work 24 hours a day or on weekends, you've got to be able to approve purchase orders or enter your time while you're sitting on your couch. So having the ability to do it on your iPhone or your iPad is key, and the only way these companies can stay competitive with the others. So the cons that I want to highlight for Acumatica, so reliance on third-party add-ons, and that the fact that their strong suit is manufacturing, right? So if you're a services industry or pharmaceuticals or anything else, you're probably not going to look at Acumatica. So although they've been rated as one of the top 5, they specialize in manufacturing, you're going to end up paying a lot more money to buy these additional bundles and third parties for integrations. And so I think that kind of brings them down. So the next one we're going to talk about is Microsoft Dynamics. So this was born based off of the old legacy Microsoft applications on-premise, including GP, Nav, and AX. Has anyone used those, or is anyone still using those ones today? Yeah, a lot of you, right? So Microsoft Dynamics is their attempt to take all the functionality, the best functionality from those three legacy platforms that they've acquired over time, and to put that in the cloud. So the best of those three, and put a cloud version. Fortunately, they've kind of struggled out of the gates, and they've switched their roadmap a couple times, but I think they're finally course correcting and have a good future and a good layout of how their product release is going to be. So some of the pros I want to highlight for Microsoft, probably the most important one that's up here, is its ability to do estimates and invoices directly in Outlook. And after those send, it will automatically do direct integration back into Microsoft Dynamics and update your system appropriately. There's no back and forth. You're not dealing with EDI from the system itself to send some of these communications to vendors. You can do it directly from your Office 365 or even your older versions of Outlook and have it automatically update the system. Another one is the dashboards that they've come out with displayed right on your homepage. It's very collaborative, intuitive, and easy to set up some of the KPIs that automatically come with the system out of the box. So some of the cons with Dynamics, and just so everyone's aware, this is the business edition of Dynamics, not the enterprise one. So there is a difference between the two. They have two different versions. This is for the small and medium-sized business one. So this one is only available, unfortunately, at the time in US and Canada. So for those of you that have subsidiaries internationally around the world, you're probably not going to choose this version of Dynamics. You're going to have to choose the enterprise one that comes with a much higher license and implementation costs. And then also one other thing to highlight as a con for Microsoft is its only inventory costing method is FIFO. So we saw on a previous slide that SAP Business only had the one, and so in Microsoft additionally only has the one for their business edition. So kind of limiting. I'm not sure why they did that way, but sure they had some rationale. So the next solution is Oracle's NetSuite. So NetSuite to me stands out because out of the 5 that we're reviewing here, they are the only one to start in the cloud and remain in the cloud the whole time versus Microsoft, Acumatica, and Sage all being on-premise traditional systems, and then they're kind of playing catch-up to get into the cloud along with everyone else, where NetSuite started in the cloud and they've always been there. And with Oracle's purchase of them back in 2016, it's only made them stronger, have more funds, and allow them to hear more customer feedback and improve their functionality. So some of the additional pros with NetSuite is their integrated CRM. So if you decide you're buying the CRM and the financials, there's no separate installation of the module. It's already there, it's integrated, and it works great. Another key pro that I want to call out versus some of the others that we've seen so far is that the broad enterprise feature and how it applies to a variety of businesses. So as I was saying in the past couple, with the inventory or not having the CRM, you know, those systems are very particular to a particular industry, where NetSuite does a really good job, and they actually create specific bundles for the different industries. So they have a financial services bundle that you can implement on top of your financials. They have a manufacturing, a wholesale distribution. So they really do a great job of specializing industry by industry, and they don't try and stick in one. Now, additionally, that's also what makes them have one of the cons, is because there's so much you can do in NetSuite, and oftentimes there's 3 or 4 different ways you can run one process because of all the resources it had. So the broad but complex feature set. So it's kind of a pro and con that you're getting with that, because there's so much you can do with it. So the next one is Sage 300. I know there's many versions of Sage. There's 100, 300, 500. This particular author chose to review the Sage 300 cloud version, although it does still come on-prem if you would choose to go that way. Some of the pros from this one, again, the mobile access. So having the ability to do it from your phone, your iPad, and being able to, in meetings, is just key. Again, another one is the CRM being directly integrated in the system. It's not a separate tool. You can potentially get rid of your bolt-ons like Salesforce or other tools if you're comfortable enough. You can get sales on board. And then also the final one, so customizable ribbon-based navigation menus, very easy to customize, similar to NetSuite and in Microsoft, where they have great dashboards with great KPIs that are very, very easy to change the widgets and the features that are available. Some of the cons, though, is if you're one of those companies and decision makers that are looking for one of these all-in-ones, silver bullets with all the functionality, Sage probably isn't going to be your top pick. Inventory module for their new cloud version isn't even available, so if you're a manufacturer, you're probably not going to go with Sage right away. And payroll, for those of you that do it in-house and don't outsource like the ADPs or the paychecks, it's not even an option, where some of the others, like SAP and Oracle's NetSuite, have payroll modules that you can do it in-house if you so choose. And then the second con I want to highlight, which was kind of a pro that I was saying for Microsoft and Oracle, is they have no hard timetable for adding these feature modules. So like, when is inventory, when's payroll, and these other ones coming? Sage has not done a very good job of getting that out to market and letting everyone know what their plan is. So, you know, if they can't decide what their product roadmap is, how can you decide, you know, what ERP you're going to choose from them, and how can you have trust in them that's going to go? But for some, you know, it does work. So. And then finally, so this is a newer one to the market. I'm sure everyone in here has either used SAP or at least knows the term SAP. But this is actually their Business One edition, so their small to business cloud version. And just like the normal SAP, the on-prem, the R3, and the S4, and the HANAs, and all those key terms you probably hear out in the marketplace, it does have a lot of the same features that make it great, which is its extensive customization. You can really tailor it to fit your needs. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes bad. It can make projects longer, but the fact that it has it out there and you have flexibility to make it work for you helps it to stand out. And also the fact that it's using some of the same technology as its big brother in SAP. It's also using the SAP HANA database. And for those of you who don't know that, it's their new technology, which all of their SAP sits on for faster reporting. All the tables are more consolidated in one area, so their analytics are up to, they say, 10 times faster than what they used to be from using traditional like BI in business warehouses. So, and then a con with SAP Business One that stuck out to me is anyone that's been on an SAP project or implemented SAP knows how expensive some of their consultants can be and the timetables that come along with that, because it's a little bit more complex and straightforward than a NetSuite or Dynamics. So there is still that German influence that makes it a little bit more complicated than it's supposed to be, I guess. All right, so moving left to right, we talked about the trend from on-premise in the cloud. We showed you some of the market players. So once you've made a decision at your organization that you are going to go to the cloud and that you've narrowed it down to some of these 5 key solutions, how do you judge which one's right for you? So I'd like to narrow it down to 5 questions that you should ask yourself as a decision maker in this process. So the first question you need to ask yourself is, you know, what business problems am I trying to solve? Am I just purchasing a new ERP and going to the cloud because it's cool, or because my competitors are doing it and I just need to, you know, keep up? Or am I trying to, the workforce is changing and IT resources just aren't the same. I can't find skill sets for people who know databases, and we just need to move to a cloud solution where it's more functional. We'll let, you know, the NetSuites or the AWS services take care of our databases. You really need to decide internally, like, what makes sense for you. Second one is, you know, how will a new solution affect my business processes? I can't tell you how many times projects I've been on where, you know, the client promises you, yes, we will change our processes to meet how this solution is going to work. But once you get there, after everything's signed, you do the kickoff. Within second meeting, there's people in the room that are saying, no, this is how we do our processes. You need to change the system to do it this way. It's not the way you should go about doing this. You really need to take a step back, evaluate the way you're doing your processes. Do you need to change? And you really need to pick the solution that makes the most sense to you. So third question, I know we've been kind of touting and explaining the cloud, but for some people, you still need to sit back and ask yourself, should I continue to do on-premise, buy new on-premise, or should I go into the cloud? And there's advantages and disadvantages to both, obviously. Within on-premise and sticking with that model, there's the advantage of having capitalized costs and perpetual licenses, so you pay for them once and you're done, versus in the cloud, you continue to pay on a monthly and yearly basis and it never ends, so there's an advantage there for staying on-prem. Alternatively, in the cloud, it's an expense, so if your company is rather have that expense and the quick write-off right away, then the cloud might make sense. Also, it's more scalable, it's a lot, and oftentimes more friendly to use. You don't have to worry about the three-tier system and keeping everything in sync at all times. So again, it really comes down to your preference. Also, if you're a financial services company and you read the news and you see the target breaches and everyone else into it, you might think that you can secure the system better yourself by keeping on-premise. So you really just need to decide what makes sense for you and how you keep your customers' data safe. All right, so next question that you ask yourself is, should you get a horizontal or a vertical ERP? I kind of beat on this a little bit, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the terms, horizontal ERP is really like the NetSuites and the Microsofts of the world that have all the different modules all in one, all ready to go and integrated directly. No integrations, no bolt-ons. So you have your financials, you have your CRM, you have your payroll, you have your HR. However, if you're a smaller company still growing, unsure if that's what you want, or you really like some of your other applications you have today, then you might want to choose one that's more specific, whether to your industry or just to that particular business process, and that's more where the vertical ERP solution comes into place. When I think of this, I think of Deltek. I'm not sure if anyone here in this room has heard of Deltek, but they're the industry leader for government ERP systems, and so I wouldn't choose them as a manufacturing, but I know they're a class above when it comes to the government ERP. So you really just need to figure out what makes sense for all of you. And then finally, a one near and dear to my heart as a previous purchaser and buying some of these solutions in my previous roles, but what are you actually buying when you buy a new system, and especially in the cloud? Do you realize that applications like Oracle and Microsoft and SAP, they push down upgrades twice a year? Is your company ready for that? Do you have the resources ready to test on a semi-annual basis for the new upgrades that come? Are you ready to take on? Or are you more the company that wants to kind of sit back and you prefer the on-premise where you kind of control your own destiny and when the new features and when you're ready for them? So it's a big decision when you're looking at it. And also, what's the pricing like when you're buying these? As I was mentioning, the cloud is much, much different than the on-prem in terms of the pricing and how it works, and the whole idea of the watermark. And how do you accurately predict how many licenses you're going to need? How do you prevent yourself from overbuying? Because obviously the sales guy from the Oracles and SAPs, they're going to say, hey, if you buy 50 more licenses than you need right now because we know you're going to grow, we're going to give you this great discount. But then when you buy it, you're stuck. So read the fine print very, very clearly. Make sure you have outs, and just make sure you understand what you're getting into when selecting a new product. So I'm going to now pass it off to Kathy to talk about implementation success and some of the killers.
All right, thank you very much, Jim. You did a great job. I'm Kathy Good, and I work at GYF, and of course I'm in the ERP group, and that's where we do the system implementation. So that's what we're going to really talk about now that you've made your decision based on all the good information that Jim gave you. Now all of a sudden we're going to say, okay, now you have to implement it. And you've decided, and now what are you going to do? This is where all the fun starts. So it's very important that you take into account proper implementation, because if you don't, the best software in the world will not get you the success results that you need unless you pay attention to some really key information and topics that you need to ensure that the implementation outcome is a successful one. So that's what we'd like to do today. We'd like to go in and say, okay, I want to have a successful implementation. So This quote is a good definition of a project success, and it's often defined as the business goals are achieved, the project costs are within budget, and the go-live days are met. But to achieve these outcomes, it's not a very easy task. It's a tremendous challenge. It takes hard work, and a project always takes hard work. But hard work doesn't always ensure success. You really have to look at a lot of different variables that happen. You have to look through your, so through our system implementation experience at GYF, we found the best projects have incorporated common principles for success and how to avoid the major pitfalls that can kill a project. So in sharing those, these are the top 5 keys to implementation success. To maintain executive and management commitment, foster effective communication channels, establish end-user adoption, define a realistic budget and schedule, and assemble the right implementation team. And I kind of want to go through each one of those to make sure that you understand all the different variables that can be within those success factors. Maintaining executive management commitment, it's really important. That top management, those executives, they have to be really, really involved in a project. The success of the project is directly tied to those business executives. They've made the decision to go with the software. They've selected the implementation team, but if they just think it's over, then the implementation isn't going to work. They have to be engaged. They have to be invested. They have to make sure that the resources available for the team is there. So it's a top-down project ownership with a clear understanding of the business advantage of that implementation is crucial. The team needs to see the value that the management places on the implementation. I know that I have a client that whenever I go to their site, we're at meetings, that top management is in the meeting. So anybody walking past the door, any end user that's there, they see how much the management is dedicated to the success of the project. There's no question. They're there all the time. They're there for any time we need support. And it's a really nice relationship, and I know that implementation is going to be successful. So management must provide project governance also to support the project by removing roadblocks, like reaffirm expectations and supplying additional resources as requested. They really have to be the champions of the project. They have to be available to make sure that whenever something is going wrong, they're there to step in to make sure that things get back on track. Sometimes we have to have them arbitrate differences, but mainly it's keeping those goals and expectations and objectives very clear. A lot of the times we also need them to step back in to the project to just reallocate resources and make sure that the resources for the implementation are available to the team. So one of the things that we've done at GYF is for every project that we have, we create a governance team. And that governance team is a combination of the implementation project, project manager, but also those key executives that are at the client. And when a particular topic comes up that cannot be held by the project team, we will take that issue to the governance team, and we will look for them for direction. They'll be able to make decisions based on whether it's a cost-benefit analysis of what needs to be done, whether we need to change the project in any way. But just knowing that we have that governance team really helps. The implementation individuals that are working on a day-to-day deliverables, they know that if we have any issues, we can go to that governance team and get it taken care of. Foster effective communication skills. Communicate, 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 and communicate again. It is so critical to communicate proactively regarding the status and issues and risks associated with the project, as well as reinforce the expectations through the length of the implementation. It's really not enough to send just emails or have here and there communications and touch points, but you have to have standardized, formalized communication efforts. Weekly status reports, weekly status meetings. We really make those mandatory, and we even ask for the executives to be involved in those, whether it's they're in the actual meeting or whether it's a virtual meeting. It's so beneficial to be able to touch point every week and have everybody there. We talked about those governance meetings, and if those executives are looking at the status reports on a weekly basis, if they're involved in the weekly meetings, you really don't have a long time to have to catch them up. They're there, they're available, and they're ready to make the decisions. So that it's very important. Core project members should share not only what the team has accomplished, but also provide a clear project roadmap of what lies ahead. And again, we do this through weekly reports so that you cover what's happened over the last week, but then you also look at what's going to happen in the coming weeks. And it's really important also that you keep track of the accomplishments that the teams have made, not just the issues that you're having, not just the problems that you're trying to overcome, but what are the accomplishments? Because every week we are accomplishing things, and it really keeps the team together. It keeps that buy-in from the team. So it's really important, like I said, to do those touch points, make sure that the team understands what they're accomplishing, but everything else is, what more is to be accomplished. But it does help to ensure that everyone stays on the same page. And again, not everything is perfect. You really do have to point out the potential barriers that could stall the success of the project. And I won't bring the governance up again, but it just is a very important thing to have that there to support you. Third key to implementation success is establish end user adoption. And the business case, that did what Jim was going through, the ones that created the business case, the people that worked on making the decision on what implementation you were going to implement, or what software you were going to implement, those decision makers are usually not the same as the people that are implementing the software. The executors of that project plan, they're not the same. So there has to be some sort of transfer of knowledge, and there has to be some sort of immediate impact on the project team that gets appointed to go with a project plan. They need to start from ground zero. They need to be there at the very beginning of that project plan and understand what the objectives of the project are. It's very important that they become part of the planning process very up in the beginning. All team members must be invested in the success of the project and become champions of the solution. The project team becomes the cheerleaders, the rah-rahs. You need to have them involved. You need to have them bought into the project. That's why it's so important that they understand the value and that they understand what management is trying to accomplish by implementing the software. They spend a lot of money to be able to bring the software in, so it's very important that these team members stay vital to the success of the implementation. They become your super users. They are involved in train the trainer. They actually will end up doing some of the training, and they will help acclimate the users to the solution. The last one here is all users should have adequate access and training and perform sufficient system testing. The system is to function, if it's to function as designed, it really, you have to have the system tested. So you have to have a documentation of a testing plan. You have to have a strategy. You need to have dedicated resources for testing. Because testing ensures that the system is going to work, but it also takes the opportunity to have these super users really trained on the system. If they're doing the testing, then they're also being trained on the system. They also become the troubleshooters for you. And the troubleshooters also, when they're troubleshooting, they're creating additional skills that make them very valuable to the organization and being able to get the end users to adopt. They be able to go out into the workforce into the end user environment in the client location, and they will be able to do the training, and they will be able to acclimate the users to the new system. Defining a realistic budget and schedule is also very important. Don't rely on software vendors and what they tell you. You really need to take a look at your own costs. You need to use your own judgment. Management can often underestimate the costs. Implementations can require significant investment and effort over an extended period of time. So you need to take a very close look at the different costs that are going to be associated for your particular company. Proper training, or proper planning, and realistic estimates used, and it must be done at the very beginning of the project. Clearly defining the appropriate success criteria helps keep the project team on track and heading for the same common goal. Everyone, again, has to be on the same page, and this actually provides definition of scope, and you might need to have this clear, upfront, common goal and what the success criteria are, because we're going to talk about scope creep in a little bit, and just knowing and clearly defining that appropriate success criteria will help the project team as well as the governance team in helping to fight against the potential scope creep. The implementation plan must stay true to the original business objectives and project definition. So when you're working on the project plan, you really need to include specific tasks and deliverables. You have to have critical guidelines, and you have to have the project budget set appropriately. And the one thing I wanted to mention here is integrations with systems that you already have in place at your organization become very important when you're starting to put the budget and the plan together. Integrations with current systems that the new system software is going to have to communicate with, it can cause serious delays. It can be very expensive. You really need to make sure that you're looking at all of the costs and all of the time associated with integrating those pieces together with a new software. And the last key to implementation success is to assemble the right implementation team. You have to look for experience, and that's for like an internal project manager, but you also have to look for experience if you're going to an implementation partner. You have to know, and you have to make sure that there's a skill set match. And in addition, you really need to know that you're going to be able to work with this partner. You want to enter into a very advisory role. You want to have trust with the implementation partner that you pick, because you need to be able to work together and achieve a common goal. And you as a company need to stay open-minded and be ready to debate ideas, and be able to take what the implementation partner is telling you, take it in, be able to make some decisions. But again, look at them as a trusted partner. It shouldn't be an adversarial position. Management must assign internal resources who are available, committed, knowledgeable about the company's business processes. Again, we talk about that skill set match to be able to meet the project deliverables. Oftentimes, we want to have people that are very involved in the current processes within the system area that you're looking to replace. You need to understand those current business process requirements. But the key here, I think, is the committed resources. It's very difficult going into a project and finding resources that are committed to just your project plan. You're often getting people to work on the project that have 3 hats, 2 hats. They're always working on something else. And again, I think that goes back to the management. And you as managers within your company, you really need to say, if we are going to take on this major overhaul or this system implementation, we really are going to have to dedicate some resources to it. Because otherwise, you're just doing a lot of multitasking. Those people are stressed out. They're not able to focus on the project, and it just causes delays in the implementation. It's also important to include representation from all areas of the organization affected by the new solution. So IT should not be implementing this alone. I know that IT and finance need to be involved, and they're very important, but they're usually not the ones that are completely impacted by the system that's being put in place. You really need to make sure that people that are affected by the software that's going into place, they need to be involved in the project. They're vital to the success of the project. So you really need to include people and folks from across your organization. So that was the top 5 implementation strengths. That's management commitment, communication, end user adoption, having a realistic budget and schedule, and then also assemble the right implementation team. But again, even if you had those success factors and all the other success factors you could think of, as you navigate the minefield of an implementation, you really need to be aware that there are some implementation killers. You need to make sure that you're aware of what they can be, what their potential is, and you also really have to have a plan or strategy to be able to know how you're going to deal with it. These are the top 5 implementation killers that we put together. We experienced them, and I think that they're worth talking about. They're ineffective requirements gathering, scope creep, ignoring change management, the fear of change, expecting too much too soon, and the dreaded data migration. I think by managing and these factors, I think though if you can try to avoid them, if you can deal with them, I think that you'll be much better off in a much more effective implementation. So ineffective requirements gathering. It's important to document current business processes, and I know Jim talked about this. This is getting back to what he had mentioned. You need to ensure that the software will meet the organizational requirements to meet the future goals and objectives that the management has set out for this new software. But it doesn't mean that you customize your new software to meet those old processes, and this is where I'm talking about Jim. We can go in and we can start to do an implementation, but as soon as you get end users involved, they say, well, no, that we can't do it that way because we do it this way. And so they need to understand the way they do their current business processes, but they have to be open to be able to take the functionality of the new system and implement it. Because you're spending a whole lot of money and you're not going to get any functionality out of it if you're always trying to customize the new system to fit the old system's processes. So you do need to do the due diligence of identifying the requirements up front, because if you don't, then you are going to be doing a lot of changing and or adding of requirements throughout the project. And they can have significant cost and schedule implications. But again, you don't have to change the system to meet the old processes. You just need to understand them, make sure the new system software can accommodate them so that you're able to really take advantage of the new system functionality. Scope creep. Every project has the potential for scope creep, which is going beyond the initial project plan. And users start asking for enhancements and customizations before the software is even implemented. They don't even know what the new software can do, and they still want something that they have currently today. So you kind of want to be nice. You want to say, sure, we can do that, we can do this, we can do that. But those little subtle changes end up being rolling up into a ball and becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So you really have to hold firm to making sure that that scope creep really doesn't come into play. There's a couple ways to deal with it. One is the governance team. And you can say, you know, we're going to the governance team because they can provide support. They're going to keep that project on track. They don't want to have the scope creep. It could cost more money. But some of the things that you can do internally to the project team is you can really kind of be patient with that. and let the end user see that they really don't need that customization. Once they see the system up and running, they might not have to have that, that additional little bit of scope that they wanted to have when they originally started the project. But the request for customizations, you also have to be careful of, because as Jim also said, when new system releases come out from your system software vendor, if you have all of these different customizations and that you're trying to keep control of, a new release comes along, you are not going to be able to do that effectively. You're not going to be able to take on new functionality from the system software if you're too worried about these customizations that you've let creep into the scope of your project. And also scope creep can just be making the project bigger than it has to be as well, and costing more money. So again, going back to the management and the project manager, you have to stick with the current objectives and budget and timeline as closely as possible to your current project plan. Another killer would be ignoring change management and the fear of change. Often organizations only look at the IT system solution and streamline and simplify their business process, but they misjudge the implications on their organization and on their employees. And system changes can have a major impact on how end users feel about their job. They can feel threatened. You rarely go into an organization where, oh, this change is coming down the pike, and I really can't wait for it. I love it. I want to do this. It's an opportunity for me to learn new skills. It's an opportunity for me to become more valuable to the organization. You do find that sometimes, and that's great, but oftentimes that's not the case. You find the people that are very uncertain about their job, what's their future, they're going to lose control, this software is going to take my job away, it's certainly not going to make me be more important, it could make me antiquated, and again, just dealing with a lot of uncertainty. And what happens is then you get the resistance to change. And that resistance to change can lead to a negative system connotation and poor acceptance of the new solution. And it might only be a few people, but a few people can really affect your implementation. So you really have to find out who these naysayers are. You need to be careful, you need to watch them. You don't need to call them out or anything, but what you can do is you can try to get them involved. Try to make them stakeholders. Try to get them responsible for something that will also be successful for the project if it gets accomplished. That way they can see that their accomplishment and their success is related to the project. So it's very, you can tell who they are, you can keep an eye out for them. Sometimes you can't, but most of the time you can. But trying to effectively deal with them, it's an important part of making sure that this implementation killer doesn't get the best of the project. Expecting too much too soon. So many times management gets the new software, they spend a lot of money for it, they're enamored with the software's bells and whistles, and they want the system implemented like yesterday. And it's really nice when you have the enthusiasm for the management to get something up and to get it running and you have the support and the implementation team is flying down the track. But if they ask for things too soon and if there's accelerated timetables, that only leads to like inefficiencies. You're putting something in place very quickly, but then you have to go back and you do have to do rework and you have to do just making adjustments. And that's like pulling kind of the cart before the horse, and it's just pulling the project along too quickly. It ends up taking more time and costing more money in the long run. So you have to be really careful. You have to stick with that project plan. It has to be, again, a realistic one. We've talked about that before. It has to be realistic, and it has to fit your organization. And doing it too quickly is not always, and I would say most often, not the right way to go. The Big Bang methodology can overburden all parts of the organization and may lead to dealing with a large volume of issues with insufficient resources. And again, this Big Bang is like, let's do everything now. Let's do all of it. Like when some of the software packages are so robust with functionality, let's just do it all at once. And when you do that, an organization can bite off more than it can chew. We've already talked about sometimes there's limited resources available to the project, but if you take too much of the system implementation and you do it right off the bat, it could really be too big and affect too much of the organization, and that organization and the business can't absorb it. So one of the lessons that we've learned and that we've been doing is project teams are considering like a phased-in approach that minimize customizations for the initial go-live date. So try to get a very basic feature into the system and then build on the functionality. You get success right away, you get training right away, from getting people and the end user seeing what the system can do, and then you can add on functionality as you go along, and you can incorporate the system enhancements. But you don't have to do it all at once, and you don't have to do it on day one. The last implementation killer, as we're seeing a lot of, is just data migration. And your new implementation system, the new system that you're going to have in the software, is only going to be as good as the data that you put on it. And what we're finding is organizations consistently underestimate the amount of time and effort that goes into data migration activities for the duration of an implementation. Taking that old data that's on your legacy system and putting it onto the new system. It's an extensive effort. It's significant. It costs a lot of money in time and effort because the legacy data is usually not centralized and it's usually not adequately maintained. So if you do have a legacy system and you do take care of your data and it's all centralized and you know that you could get to it whenever you want and you know that you can map it easily to a new software, then you're great. But often that's not the case. So what we really ask, and I think what you should be cognizant of, is if you are going to have a system implementation, make sure you have that legacy system data ready. Don't wait until the project starts. Get it ready beforehand. Be organized. Be ready to convert that data on day one when the project team comes into play. Make sure you're cleansing your data. A lot of the times you have customer data, vendor data of customers and vendors that you haven't used in 10 years. So why is that data still out there? Do some cleansing, get rid of the data. It just makes sense to do that. So be strategic about the amount of data you want to migrate as well. And then organize and convert the data required to achieve your business objectives. And I guess the last thing I would say on the data is, legacy data is an asset to your company, but the older the data is, the less valuable it is. And you really have to do a cost-benefit analysis to understand what is the value of that data. Do I need it? Can I get rid of it? And I kind of look at it like if you're going to move to a new house and you have all storage boxes in your garage or in your basement, and you haven't looked at them in 10 years. When you're going to move to a new house, are you going to put them on the truck and move them over to the new basement? Or are you going to move them over to the new garage? And that's the time to get rid of it. It's the time to get rid of your data that you really don't need. Because again, it does cost money to put it on the truck and to get it over to the new house and unload it. So it's just also happening with your data. And you have to look at what kind of detail and what kind of transactions that you really need to bring over to the new system, because it's great to have the data, but do you really need it? And you really have to look at that. Because again, it can make delays in your project. So that would be all for us. So those are the killers: ineffective requirements gathering, scope creep, ignoring change management, expecting too much too soon, and data migration. And I guess I would say wish you success in any potential implementations that you're doing, and just a little window into some of the things that you might get into and what you want to stay in tune for success and the pitfalls of your implementation killers. So thanks for your attention. Thanks, Jim.